The Datejust is an absolute icon. It's Rolex's best-selling model of all time, but it's also available in more sizes than any other model. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ripley Sellers, and today we're talking all about Rolex Datejust sizes. Now, the Datejust is Rolex's most diverse collection. No other model is offered in more sizes and more configurations, but there are a lot of sizes of the Datejust. Some Rolex models have maybe 1 or 2 sizes. The Datejust has 5, some are discontinued, and one, we can even call it a +6 honorary member. It's not a Datejust, but you'll probably see it referred to as a Datejust. So let's get into all the different Datejust sizes. We're going to work from going from largest to smallest within the Datejust collection. Up first is the Datejust 41. Now, the 41mm Datejust is the largest size Datejust, and it is honestly a new addition to the brand's catalog within the context of the collection. The Datejust itself has been around since 1945, but up until 2009, the largest available model was 36mm. In 2009, Rolex rolled out the Datejust 2 with 41mm, and then in 2016, the brand basically updated the Datejust 2 to make the Datejust 41. As its name suggests, the 41mm Datejust has a case diameter of 41mm, but to go along with its larger size, you also get a slightly larger lug width of 21mm. Despite being bigger than the standard 36mm model, the Datejust 41 runs on the same movement, so the main difference between the Datejust 41 and the standard Datejust 36 is just that it is a larger watch by a few millimeters. Now, up next is the Rolex Datejust 36. The Datejust 36 is the original Datejust. The original, the classic, the iconic, the one that you probably are thinking of if you think of a Rolex Datejust. It's been around since 1945. Rolex has never stopped offering a 36mm size, and most people consider it the Goldilocks, where it can be worn by men, women, people with large wrists, small wrists, and it never feels too big or just undersized in any circumstance. Now, because the Rolex Datejust 36 has been around as long as the Datejust itself, you're going to find more options for the 36mm than the 41mm model, and that's simply due to the fact that Rolex has been making it for longer and there's just more of them out there in the wild. Additionally, I wouldn't consider there to be any vintage 41mm models. Vintage Datejust 36 models are plentiful, and you can find all sorts of different versions that have sapphire crystals, acrylic crystals, quickset movements, and non-quickset movements. If you're looking for the most diversity or a weird Datejust off the beaten path, the 36mm series is probably going to be your best bet, and it's one of those watches that's either never been out of style and is always a classic option, basically for everybody. So before we get to the Datejust 31, which is technically considered and officially Rolex's mid-size Datejust offering, it's worth mentioning the 34mm Rolex Date. Now, the Date is basically just a 34mm Datejust, but it isn't actually considered a Datejust, and it's no longer part of Rolex's catalog as it was recently discontinued, as it really was sort of the oddball out that didn't fit into the rest of the collection. Historically, because of its smaller size, the Date was positioned as the more affordable offering, so you'll find 14-karat versions of the Date instead of the 18-karat versions of the Datejust that they were using at the era, but some people will consider the Date a Datejust, even though it isn't, so it's worth mentioning that there is something that looks like a Datejust. It's just called the Date, and it's 34mm. Now, let's get into the 31mm model. The Rolex Datejust 31 was introduced in the late 1950s to be the mid-size Datejust that could sit between the full-size men's model at 36mm and the ladies' Datejust. 31mm is a bit of a sweet spot if you want to choose between those two, but these days it's typically women who wear the 31mm model, unless the man himself wants a notably smaller package on the wrist. Additionally, because the 31mm model is a bit of the odd one out, you'll sometimes see 31mm Datejusts fitted with president bracelets, called like the mid-size president, even though it's not a Day-Date model, and you'll also see certain bezels, sometimes set with diamonds, that aren't an option on the other Datejust sizes. Now we get to the first of the two Lady-Datejust sizes. Now, the Lady-Datejust came after the standard 36mm Datejust, and the whole concept of it was to provide all of the same functionality of Rolex's standard flagship Datejust in a much smaller package. Now, the Datejust 28, technically the Lady-Datejust 28, first appeared in 2015 to replace the previous 26mm model. Now, what you get is basically just the exact same thing as what you'd find among the 31 and 36 and 41mm models, just shrunk down to a much smaller package. Compared to the outgoing 26mm model, the 28mm Lady-Datejust offers just a bit more wrist presence that brings it into contemporary preferences, while still being notably a small watch and one that's going to fit perfectly on a woman's wrist. And last but not least, the smallest Datejust available, the Lady-Datejust 26. This was the original size for the Lady-Datejust model. It is the smallest version of the Datejust you're going to find, and even the branded versions of the Lady-Date also had a 26mm case diameter. On the wrist, you're going to notice the 26 is a bit more svelte than the 28mm version of the Datejust, but both are notably small watches. If you're going for the Datejust and want the most elegant package, the Lady-Datejust 26 is easily going to be your go-to choice. Additionally, similar to the 36 versus 41mm Datejust models, the 26 was produced for a much longer amount of time than the 28mm model, which means that if you're looking for a 28mm Lady-Datejust, you're basically only looking for a watch between 2015 and now, versus if you're looking for a Lady-Datejust 26, you've got decades worth of different options, multiple different references, vintage versus modern leading ones, and a lot more variety of options, and typically at a much lower price. Since the Datejust is Rolex's best-selling watch of all time, we get tons of questions about the Datejust, so we're going to answer a few of them right here. First, probably the most common one is, how do you tell if a Rolex Datejust is 36mm or 41mm? Well, if you can measure them, that would be the simplest way, but you can also just look at the proportions. On the 41mm Datejust, the bracelet will have a bit more of a steep taper. Certain elements like the hands, lugs, bezel will be a bit wider than the 36mm model. But another thing to consider is just the age of the watch. 36mm Datejust can be found all the way from 1945 to today. Anything that's going to be 41 was produced from 2009 forward. So if you see a vintage Datejust, one without a quick-set movement, one with a plastic crystal, that's guaranteed to be a 36mm model. Among the more contemporary ones, you're going to have to start looking at some of the finer points and proportions, and best thing ever is if you can hold the two side by side with a known 36 or 41mm model, it becomes immediately apparent. Next is a 36mm Rolex too small for a man? Absolutely not. I wear a 36mm Datejust. It was created to be a men's watch in 1945. It was even 2mm larger than the standard size for men's watches. So is a 36mm too small? Well, only if you think it's too small, but according to Rolex, no, it's certainly not too small for a man. Next is, what is the most popular Rolex Datejust size? Right now, among male buyers, the most popular Rolex Datejust is the Rolex Datejust 41. However, within the context of the Datejust history, it's going to be the 36mm model, and that's simply because more of them have been sold. However, when it comes to what watches people are buying most these days, it is the Datejust 41 that is the most popular version of the Datejust. And lastly, is the 41mm Rolex Datejust too big? Well, again, this is going to depend on your wrist size. For someone like myself, who has wrists about 6.5, 6.75 inches, it feels a little bit big for me. I can pull one off, but I prefer the 36mm model. If you have wrists that are smaller than 6.5 inches, you may find the 41mm model to be a bit too big. So, is it too big? This just depends on your preferences and your wrist size, but for most people, especially male buyers, the 41mm model is going to be a great fit. With 5 Datejust sizes available, one of them being discontinued, plus the 34mm Date, which isn't actually a Datejust, there are a ton of different sizes when it comes to Rolex's most iconic model. Additionally, it's important to remember that there are no wrong choices. At the end of the day, these are all Rolex Datejust watches, and while certain things like your preferences and price point and just how you want your watch to wear are all going to be the most important factors when deciding, you can't make a bad choice, because at the end of the day, they're all Rolex Datejusts, and they all come from one of the world's most famous luxury manufacturers. If you have any more comments, don't forget to drop them in the description below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you again in the next one.